Some of the most foundational stories in all of human history are, well, they're also the most ethically challenging. Today, we're going to unpack two really famous tales from the Old Testament. And we're going to explore that difficult, sometimes messy intersection where faith, history, and modern reason all collide.
And really, it all kind of boils down to this one question. What is the ultimate test of faith? Is it just believing in something you can't see? Or is it something more, like a willingness to act in ways that defy all human logic and maybe even our sense of morality? It's a question people have been wrestling with for thousands of years, and we're about to see exactly why.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into Abraham's impossible choice and see how thinkers have grappled with it for centuries. Then, we'll shift gears to the brutal battle for Jericho, where the archaeological evidence tells a very different story from the Holy Text.
All right, let's kick things off with a story that's both foundational and, let's be honest, deeply unsettling. It's about a father, his beloved son, and a divine command that seems completely unthinkable. And this isn't just some ancient tale. It's a narrative that has literally created profound schisms that last to this day.
The premise is just so stark and unforgettable. You have Abraham, this old father who waited his entire life for a child. And he's commanded by the God he worships to take that son, and the text emphasizes his beloved son, up a mountain and sacrifice him. I mean, wow. It's the absolute test of faith.
But get this, right away, we hit a major fork in the road. The traditions don't even agree on the basics. In Jewish and Christian tradition, the son is Isaac. But in Islamic tradition, it's his half-brother Ishmael. And the location? Same deal. For Jews and Christians, it's Mount Moriah, which is the future site of the temple in Jerusalem. But for the Samaritans, nope, it's their holy site, Mount Gerizim.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates how those different interpretations have literally shaped the physical world. On the left, you've got the incredible Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, built on Mount Moriah. And on the right, there's Mount Gerizim in Samaria. Two different mountains, two sacred places, both claimed as the site of this one single, profound event. It's fascinating.
So, as you can imagine, this story's ethical paradox really forced philosophers and artists to confront the very nature of belief. I mean, how do you make sense of a God who would ask for something so unthinkable?
The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard was absolutely obsessed with this story. He coined this famous phrase, the teleological suspension of the ethical. So what on earth does that mean? Basically, he argued that for a higher purpose, in this case Abraham's absolute duty to God, he had to suspend normal human ethics. It was a leap of faith, way beyond our everyday understanding of right and wrong.
Now, that radical idea was taken to its fictional extreme by the playwright Henrik Ibsen. His main character, Pastor Brand, lives by this motto, intet eller alt, all or nothing. He applies this absolute no-compromise kind of faith to every single part of his life, and the results are just devastating. Ibsen shows us the terrifying real-world consequences of what can happen when a person tries to live with that Abraham level of conviction.
And that brings us to this crucial point. The story is what the religious historian Rudolf Otto called a mysterium tremendum et fascinans. It's a profound mystery that is, at the same time, terrifying. That's the tremendum, and fascinating, the fascinans. It kind of repels us with its brutality, but it also pulls us in with this raw depiction of absolute faith. Okay, let's shift gears now. We're going to move from an individual's private test of faith to a huge collective act of divinely sanctioned violence, the conquest of the city of Jericho. The book of Joshua gives a totally unambiguous account. The Israelites march around the city, the walls miraculously fall down, and then they are commanded by God to enact a holy war, to destroy every single man, woman, child, and animal inside those walls.
This act actually has a specific theological name in Hebrew, korem. It means to consecrate something, or someone, to God for total destruction, to put them under the ban. In the text, this isn't presented as random violence. It's framed as a sacred duty. And get this concept appears about 80 times in the Old Testament.
But this is where our story takes a really dramatic turn. For centuries, this was just a sacred text. But then, in the 20th century, archaeologists started digging at the site of ancient Jericho. And what they found, or maybe more importantly what they didn't find, created a huge problem.
So here's the conflict in a nutshell. On one hand, the Bible describes Joshua conquering this mighty, fortified city with massive walls. But on the other hand, The archaeological record suggests that around 1200 BCE, when this was all supposed to happen, Jericho was just a small, unwalled settlement, maybe even totally abandoned. There just were no great walls to come tumbling down.
Yeah, the work of the renowned archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon back in the 1950s was pretty decisive on this. Her excavations concluded that the great Bronze Age city of Jericho, it had already been destroyed centuries before Joshua supposedly showed up. By the time of the conquest, around 1200 BCE, there just wasn't a significant city left to conquer. Which, of course, leads us to a massive question. If the archaeology is right, and this epic battle just never happened, then why does this story even exist? Is it possible that its purpose was never meant to be a literal historical record? Could it be a theological story instead? A story about God's power and his promise to his people, not a blow-by-blow account of a military campaign?
In the end, both Abraham's sacrifice and Jericho's fall leave us wrestling with the exact same challenge. What does truth even mean when we're talking about a sacred text? Is it literal, historical fact, or is it a deeper, moral kind of truth? When faith and facts collide like this, the search for an answer, well, it often reveals more about us than it ever does about the past.